So we saw that the graphs depicting the energy distribution of a black body chamber radiating wavelengths of all kinds. It was seen that the classical theories could not, although there were several laws, Wien's distribution law and Rayleigh-Jean's law, which tried to explain black body radiation, but they could not do it really. And for the first time, Max Planck in 1900 tried to see where they were going wrong. And he observed that it was probably the assumption that equipartition, since radiation is being treated as gas particles, exerting pressure and all, we calculated radiation pressure. So equipartition law was also applied, and it might be that it was because of this uses of the equipartition law that led to the failure of the classical theory. So he tried to see what is the origin of the equipartition law, and basically it comes from Boltzmann distribution. All right. So Boltzmann distribution, the probability of that a particle has energy between E and E plus dE, that is followed by classical particles, and we saw that the average energy coming from Boltzmann distribution is kT, which was assumed in case of the classical laws. So, and this is the graph. Okay, so the it is seen that the probability goes to 1 by kT as E goes to 0, whereas it goes to 0 as E goes to infinity, and the total value, the area is the total energy or the average energy, that is kT. All right, so this is what is got if you apply Boltzmann distribution and hence get the equipartition law. So what was Max Planck's rate distribution? He observed that the fact that E goes to 0 as frequency tends to infinity is only obtainable if energy E is treated as a discrete variable and not a continuous variable having all kinds of values. So the first step, as we discussed, was to replace integration by summation in the expression of E. The second step is to assume, this was an assumption made by Planck based on mathematical basis. So he was doing entirely a mathematical derivation. Remember, this was not experiment that he was doing, but the result that he got by doing this kind of mathematical analysis gave an expression of the total energy or the energy distribution that matched the experimental value, and therein lies the success of this theory. So he assumed that energy is no longer continuous. It has discrete values that are uniformly distributed. Okay. So what are these discrete values? 0, delta E, twice delta E, thrice delta E, etc. So integral multiples of some uniform interval delta E. Okay. And he discovered that the average energy is equal to kT when delta E is small, whereas it is equal to 0 when delta E is large. So average energy equal to kT must be valid for small values of frequency, whereas average energy equal to 0 must be valid for large values of frequency. So till now, energy had there was no assumption or consideration rather of frequency dependence of energy. Planck for the first time said that this energy interval must be an increasing function of frequency. And he assumed the simplest possible increasing function, that is linear dependence. So he said that this energy interval is directly proportional to the frequency. Okay? And therefore it is equal to h nu. H nu means h is the proportionality constant. Okay, so remember the value h, the constant h, which is now universally known as Planck's constant, and we are all aware of its value all of you know the value of H, 6.67 into 10 to the power minus 34 joule second. Such a universally accepted and and a constant of such great importance was, its origin was just as a proportionality constant. It came into being playing the role of a proportionality constant, and basically Planck was the value was decided just as we try to fit curves, experimental curves, by choosing different constants by trial and error method. In the same way, Planck used that value of H for which the experimental curve had the best fit, and that is how the value of H came into being. So there was this switch from continuous to discrete by the introduction of H. So now we will go through Planck's quantum postulates. All right. First postulate is a cavity emitting black body radiation contains simple harmonic oscillators, or also known as Planck's resonators, of molecular dimensions, which undergo vibrations with all possible frequencies. The vibration of the resonator entails 1 degree of freedom only. Okay, so these resonators are vibrating with all possible frequencies. There is no restriction on the frequency, and they entail only 1 degree of freedom because they are vibrating along only one direction. Now, these resonators, while emitting or absorbing energy, do not do so continuously, but in the form of packets or quanta of energy called photons. So as I told you, that energy cannot be treated as a continuous variable, but now we are treating energy as a discrete variable, and the only allowed values are intervals in integral multiples of an interval given by delta E, which is equal to H. Okay, so these are called the packets or quanta of energy, which were given the name photons. Okay. Planck assumed that the energy of each such photon has the magnitude h nu, delta E equal to h nu, where the value of h is Planck's constant given by this, h equal to 6.62 into 10 to the power minus 34 joule second. The exchange of energy, emission or absorption, takes place as integral multiple of the energy of a single resonator, that is h nu. So the amount of energy exchanged will be in the form of 0 or h nu or 2h nu, 3h nu, etc. up to n h nu, where n is just an integer. Okay. These are the postulates of Planck. Remember, Planck was a very stringent classical physicist, and quantum physics did not have its existence at that time. So Planck really did not approve of this switch from continuous to discrete. He did not really think about revolutionizing physics by bringing in a new kind of mechanics called quantum mechanics. He just tried to fit the experimental curves of blackbody radiation, and since it was not happening using the continuous nature of energy, for mathematical convenience, he assumed that only during exchange of energy, the energy becomes discrete, and the exchange is in the form of packets, not continuous exchange. Okay, he was of the firm belief that it is only during exchange of energy between radiation and the resonators on the walls of the cavity that this discreteness is playing a role. Otherwise, energy is continuous. That was his assumption. Of course, later on it was found that light or energy, electromagnetic wave, has dual role, and it can be either be electromagnetic wave in nature during certain circumstances, during certain phenomena, or it can also be a stream of particles called photons under different circumstances. It has dual nature, but when Planck was doing this work, this dual nature was not known. Okay, so this is something that you must keep in mind. So now we will go on and derive Planck's radiation law. Okay. So what are the steps? First of all, we have to have an estimate of the number of resonators per unit volume having frequency between nu and nu plus du. Okay, we must know the number of resonators per unit volume having frequency between nu and nu plus du, because now we know that energy is totally dependent on frequency, and we must have an idea of how many resonators are there. That will give us the value n. Okay, small n, the number of resonators which has frequency between nu and nu plus d nu, so that we have an estimate of the total energy of these resonators. So for this, what we'll do is we'll consider a cube of edge length a cube of side a, and inside this there are the standing waves, the waves that are reflecting from the walls of the cavity, which is now being considered to be cubical in shape and forming the standing waves, having nodes at the wall. Since they are getting reflected from the walls, so the nodes. Someone is unmuted. Can you please mute yourself? So position of nodes at the walls is fixed. That is the fundamental mode of vibration of the standing waves. And higher modes will have more nodes in between the two nodes at the walls. Now from the expression of the electromagnetic standing wave, the allowed wavelengths we obtained earlier while deriving Rayleigh-Jean's law, we saw that the allowed wavelengths, so that this mode is maintained with two nodes. I hope you can make the difference between modes and nodes from your concept of sound, because it is, you can't see me, you are only looking at the slide. So please, if you are confused regarding anything, then please unmute yourself and ask me. So the allowed values of wavelengths are lambda equal to 2a by n, where n has integral values. And so from the expression c equal to nu lambda, we can say that the allowed frequencies are c by lambda equal to nc by 2a, where n is equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. integral values. Now let us assume that the origin of the Cartesian coordinate system is at one corner of this cube. Okay, and cos alpha, cos beta and cos gamma are the direction cosines. I hope you remember all this. So the projection of the direction of propagation of a given standing wave on the edges will be a cos alpha, a cos beta and a cos gamma. Assuming any random direction of the standing wave inside the box, its projection on the three walls, where the three walls give you the direction of the three Cartesian coordinates, they will be a cos alpha, a cos beta and a cos gamma. Okay. Now since nodes are to exist on the walls, so over here in this expression we have to replace a by a cos alpha for the x direction, a cos beta for the y direction and a cos gamma for the z direction. So the allowed wavelengths are given by 2a cos alpha by n1, 2a cos beta by n2 and 2a cos gamma by n3. And since we know from the property of direction cosines that cos square alpha plus cos square beta plus cos square gamma equal to 1, therefore we can get from these two expressions that n1 square lambda square by 4a square plus n2 square lambda square by 4a square plus n3 square lambda square by 4a square equal to 1. I hope all of you get this. From here we get an expression of cos alpha n1 lambda by 2a, cos beta is n2 lambda by 2a, and cos gamma is n3 lambda by 2a. So putting the values of cos alpha, cos beta and cos gamma in this expression of direction cosines, we get this expression, a relation between n1, n2, n3, lambda and a. Okay, so from this we get an estimate of the sum of the squares of the integers n1, n2 and n3. So for a given mode, n1 square plus n2 square plus n3 square must be equal to 4a square by lambda square or 2a by lambda whole square. Okay, so in other words, in terms of frequency, n1 square plus n2 square plus n3 square equal to 2a nu by c whole square. Okay, this is a very important derivation, so please listen to me very carefully, follow the slide very carefully, and then, as I always tell you, work out on a paper. You should work this out on hand, by hand, trying to understand the steps. All right. So these are the allowed frequencies inside the cube. This relation gives us the allowed frequencies inside the cube. Now you can say that just now, ma'am, you said all frequencies are available. Then why are you talking about allowed frequency? Because all modes are not available. All modes of vibration are not available. Since we are considering a box in which a particular wave is getting reflected from the walls and forming stationary waves, so the necessary condition is that nodes, N-O-D-E-S, nodes are present on the walls. The two walls must contain two nodes. That is the necessary condition of vibration. Okay, so that will decide that what are the frequencies that are allowed for vibration. All frequencies will not necessarily give you two nodes at the two walls. Okay, so according to, in compliance with that condition, this is the relation that gives us the allowed frequencies inside the cube. Now in two dimensions, if we just, to simplify our working out, let us consider two dimensions, and then this equation becomes n1 square plus n2 square equal to 2a nu by c whole square. Okay, now as you can understand that this is a circle of radius 2a nu by c, right? X square plus y square equal to radius square. So if n1 and n2 form the two axes, then this is a circle of radius 2a nu by c. So the number of modes of vibration within frequency range nu and nu plus d nu is equal to the area in the positive quadrant lying between two circles of radii 2a nu and 2a nu plus d nu by c. So this is what I mean. Okay, if the two axes are n1 and n2, then this is the first quadrant. So this is not a very well drawn figure. This is drawn, as you can understand, using the paint accessory over here. So this inner circle is of radius 2a nu by c, and the outer circle is of radius 2a nu plus d nu by c, pi by c. Okay, and so this portion between the two circles of these two radii, that gives us the number of modes of vibration within frequency range nu and nu plus d. Okay, is it clear to everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So this area is given by, so that is these are the two radii. And so what will be the area? The area will be given by 1/4. Why 1/4? Because we are considering only the first quadrant. Okay. So the area of that band that I showed you in this band, we are trying to calculate the area of this band, because that will give us the number of modes within the frequency range nu and nu plus du. So what is the area of this band? Since it is only the first quadrant, we are considering 1/4. So the area of this band is 1/4 into pi into radius square. So 1/4 into pi into outer radius square minus inner radius square. That is the area. So that value comes out to be 2 pi a square mu by c square into d mu. All right. Now this was in 2 dimensions, and we considered the first quadrant, so that we divided by 1/4. Now let us just move forward to 3 dimensions, so that the number of modes of vibrations within range nu and nu plus d nu will be given by the volume lying between the spherical shells. So instead of the boundaries of 2 circles, we will now have to consider the boundaries of 2 spherical shells. Okay, so again I'll move back to this figure. So now instead of 2 dimensions, you can consider this to be a 3-dimensional figure, and I'll just try to. So basically, if this is one circle, if this is the sphere, not a circle but a sphere, and say this is the outer sphere. So this is the outer sphere and this is the inner sphere. All right, and we are trying to find out I so miss my blackboard. Okay, so okay, so we are basically trying to, so this is the inner sphere, this is the outer sphere. So this is the boundary of the inner sphere, this is the boundary of the outer sphere, and this is the first octant. So now we are considering 3 dimensions. Please try to understand that we are now considering 3 dimensions. Okay, and so you have to consider this figure in 3D, and this is the first octant, and we are trying to find out the area of this portion. Understood? Have I been able to make you understand even a little bit? Okay, so this area we are trying to find out, where I have drawn these lines, that the number of frequencies lying between this, within this shell will give us the number of modes with frequency between nu and nu plus d nu. And since we are considering this 3D now, so we have to consider 1/8 of the shell. Is it clear to you now? Is it clear why we are taking 1/8?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So 1/8 of this value. So now from 2D we are switching to 3D. So from area we are switching to volume. So you can see the formula 4/3 pi outer radius cube minus inner radius cube. Okay. So 1/8 into 4/3 pi into, if you do this calculation, you get 4 pi a cube mu squared by c cube d nu. Now a is the side of the cube which we had taken. So a cube is basically its volume. So we have 4 pi capital V nu square by c cube d nu, where capital V is the volume of the cube. Okay. So the number of vibrations per unit volume lying in the first octant will be, we have to divide this by capital V because we are taking per unit volume. It will be 4 pi mu square by c cube d nu. Now, since we are considering electromagnetic waves, so we always have to consider the two states of polarization, and therefore, considering the two states of polarization, the number of modes of vibration per unit volume within the frequency nu and nu plus d nu, we have to multiply this expression by 2 because each wave can have two states of polarization. So there will be the entire number has to be multiplied by 2. Okay, and so the number of modes lying between frequency nu and nu plus d nu, taking into account the two states of polarization, will be 8 pi mu square by c cube into d nu. So this is the number. So we had started to find out, see, the number of resonators per unit volume having frequency between nu and nu plus d nu, and this is the number. Okay, 8 pi nu square c cube into d nu. Now once we have the number, we have to next calculate the average energy for Planck's oscillators, and if we get an expression for the average energy, then we will have the expression that will be that will try to match with the experimental observation. So if the total number of resonators in the cavity is capital M, what number have we got? We have got the number of resonators in the first octant between frequencies nu and nu plus d. Now let us consider that the total number of resonators in the cavity is capital N, and if total energy is capital E, then average energy must be E by N. Average energy E bar must be E by capital N, total energy divided by total number of resonators. Now the resonators may have energies 0, delta E, 2 delta E, 3 delta E, etc. This is Planck's unique assumption. Now suppose the number of oscillators, please follow this very carefully, okay? Suppose the number of oscillators having energy 0 is N0. Number of oscillators having energy delta E is N1. Okay. So N1 is equal to N0 e to the power minus delta E by KT, taking Boltzmann distribution. So see, Planck is still taking Boltzmann distribution. Only energy in Boltzmann distribution is treated to be continuous. He is treating energy to be discrete. Okay. So if N0 is the number of oscillators having energy 0, then N1 will simply be N0 e to the power minus delta E by KT. Number of oscillators having energy 2 delta E is N2 equal to N0 e to the power minus 2 delta E by KT, and so on. So number of oscillators having energy R delta E r is another integer, 0, 1, 2, etc. up to r we are considering, is nr equal to n0 e to the power minus r delta E by kt. So the total number of resonators, capital N, is basically a sum of these numbers, n0, n1, n2, etc., nr up to nr, and etc. nr is not the n. Okay. So the total number of resonators is n equal to n0 plus n1 plus n2 plus etc. plus nr plus etc. up to whichever number of energy are there. So we have got the expressions of n1, n2, etc. in terms of n0. So we can write capital N equal to n0 plus n0 e to the power minus delta E by kt plus n0 e to the power minus twice delta E by kt, etc. Can be simplified as n0 into 1 plus e to the power minus delta E by kt plus e to the power minus twice delta E by kt plus etc. Now let us suppose that y equal to e to the power minus delta E by kt. Okay, so basically we can now write capital N equal to n0 into 1 plus y square plus y cube plus etc. plus y to the power r plus etc. So can you identify this series? Can you identify this series? The series in the bracket? Key series eta 0, 1, 2, 3 sab power e. You should identify this. n0 by 1 minus y. Binomial. 1 minus y to the power minus 1. Binomial expansion. So capital N equal to n0 by 1 minus y equal to n0 by 1 minus e to the power minus delta E by kt. We replace the value of y that we substituted. So total energy is, we saw that there are n0 particles with n0 resonators with 0 energy, delta n1 resonators with delta E energy, n2 with twice delta E energy, nr resonators with r delta E energy, and so on. So total energy is number of resonators multiplied by the energy of each of such resonators and the sum of them. So total energy is basically 0 into n0 plus delta E into n1 plus twice delta E into n2 plus thrice delta E into n3 plus etc. plus r delta E into nr plus etc. And so if we now put the values of n1, n2, n3 etc. in terms of n0, then this is the expression that we get of total energy. So that we can write total energy E equal to n0 delta E into inside bracket this expression. Again we take the help of y and we can write total energy is n0 delta E y by 1 minus y whole square. So average energy E by N is total energy divided by N. So we have got both total energy expression and N in terms of the substitution Y, and putting that we get average energy equal to Y delta E divided by 1 minus Y. Again we put back the value of Y and we get average energy as delta E by e to the power delta E by kt minus 1. Okay, each and every step has been done. So even if you cannot follow it now, if you look back at the slides when I send you the slides in group, I'm sure you will be able to follow it. According to Planck's hypothesis, delta E equal to h nu. So now will come the actual play after this calculation. So in the expression of average energy, we put h nu in place of delta E, and this is the value we obtain for the average energy. Now we already calculated the number of oscillators per unit volume. Remember, that was the first thing that we calculated. The number of oscillators per unit volume was given by 8 pi mu square by c cube into d mu. This is the number of oscillators per unit volume, and the average energy is given by this. So average energy per oscillator is this. So the energy density within frequency range d nu given by E nu d nu is this average energy multiplied by this number density of oscillator. Okay, number of oscillators per unit volume means number density. So E nu d nu is given by 8 pi nu square by c cube d nu into h nu by e to the power h nu by kt minus 1, or E nu d nu equal to 8 pi nu square by c cube into h nu by e to the power h nu by kt minus 1 into d nu. This is Planck's radiation law in terms of frequency. Okay, very important expression. You have come across this expression earlier in your quantum theory class, but I'm sure you have not done this statistical mechanical treatment of deriving the law, and so this is how you will derive the law if asked to do. And this is a very common question that comes in your examination. Derive Planck's radiation law taking into consideration Planck's assumption. So you have to know what Planck's assumptions were, and based on those assumptions, so basically first you are treating the waves as stationary waves with nodes at the two walls. Using that first hypothesis, you calculate the number density of the oscillators having frequency between nu and nu plus d nu. This is what you get. This is the first step. Then you calculate the average energy using Boltzmann distribution, but after that, at the end, you use Planck's hypothesis and replace the value of delta E in the expression by h nu. Okay, so in the final expression you have the average value, or sorry, you have the energy density in terms of frequency as 8 pi h nu cube divided by c cube e to the power h nu by k2 minus 1 into d nu. This is Planck's radiation law in terms of frequency. In terms of wavelength, you just use the relation c equal to nu lambda, and therefore mu equal to c by lambda, giving d nu equal to c by lambda square d lambda. We consider modulus so that we ignore the sign, and therefore E lambda d lambda becomes 8 pi hc by lambda to the power 5 d lambda by e to the power hc by lambda kt minus 1. This is Planck's radiation law in terms of wavelength. So we have obtained Planck's radiation law both in terms of wavelength and in terms of frequency, and both are important. Okay, if you look at the formula in terms of frequency, you see that basically E nu d nu is a constant multiplied by h nu by e to the power h nu by kt minus 1 into d nu. Now, as nu goes to 0, h nu by kt goes to 0. There will be this will be h nu to the power cube. Sorry. Okay. And e to the power h nu by kt goes to 1 plus h nu by kt, so that E nu becomes, average value of E nu becomes of the order of kt. All right. Whereas when nu goes to infinity, h nu by kt goes to e to the power h nu by kt goes to infinity, and average energy goes to 0. This is exactly what is depicted by the experimental curves. At nu goes to 0, average energy goes to kt. As nu goes to infinity, average energy goes to 0, and this is where Rayleigh-Jean's law failed. Remember, as nu goes to infinity, Rayleigh-Jean's law predicted that energy goes to infinity too, which was the ultraviolet catastrophe. So now, with Planck's assumption that energy is a discrete variable, we have done away with that discrepancy, and we can see clearly that as nu goes to 0, E goes to kt, And as mu goes to infinity, E goes to 0, which is in total agreement with the experimental curves. Okay? See, Rayleigh jeans, Wiens, and the blue solid line is given by Planck, which is exactly matching with the experimental curve. Now, after this, after derivation of Planck's law, we have basically the derivation of the different laws, the classical laws, as special cases of this is Planck's radiation law in terms of wavelength, and from this basically the classical laws of Rayleigh jeans, Wiens, and Stefan Boltzmann can be obtained just as simple mathematical consequences. For example, Rayleigh jeans law from Planck's law. We know Rayleigh jeans law is valid for long wavelengths, that is small frequencies. What happens to Planck's law at small frequencies? Long wavelengths means lambda goes to infinity. So hc by lambda kt goes to 0. So e to the power hc by lambda kt goes to 1 plus hc by lambda kt plus etc. If you write the series, we just have 1 plus hc by lambda kt. So in the expression of E lambda d lambda in terms of wavelength, we have E lambda d lambda equal to 8 pi kt by lambda to the power 4 d lambda, which is nothing but Rayleigh jeans law. So when lambda goes to infinity or frequency is small, we see that Planck's law reduces to Rayleigh jeans law. So it is just a mathematical consequence under certain circumstances. So basically Rayleigh jeans law, Wiens law, etc. are coming from Planck's law as limiting conditions, under limiting conditions. Wien's radiation formula is valid for small wavelengths, that is large frequencies. What happens at small wavelengths? hc by lambda kt goes to infinity. So in the expression, we have E lambda d lambda equal to 8 pi hc by lambda to the power 5 e to the power hc by minus hc by lambda kt d lambda, which is nothing but Wien's distribution law, Wien's law of energy distribution law at small wavelength. So again, we are getting Wien's radiation formula as a limiting condition of Planck's law under large frequency or small wavelength. So Rayleigh jeans law comes from Planck's law under the condition, limiting condition of small frequencies or large wavelength, and Wien's radiation formula comes as a limiting condition of Planck's law for small wavelength or large frequency. Okay. Now at a constant temperature, the wavelength lambda max at which energy density becomes maximum is also obtained from Planck's formula by putting dE d lambda at lambda equal to lambda max equal to 0 using the condition of maxima and minima. So taking log on both sides of Planck's energy density, we get this expression. So differentiating with respect to lambda, again each and every mathematical step has been done, and I am not reading them out because that becomes extremely boring. So you can see that at lambda equal to lambda max, dE d lambda equal to 0, so that from this expression, basically, doing a little bit of algebra, you get this transcendental equation, solving which the value of x comes out to be 4.9651, and that gives us lambda max into t equal to hc by xk, which is equal to a constant. And so we get lambda max t equal to a constant, which is Wien's displacement law, and mathematically obtained value of this constant matches with the experimental value that is given by Wien's displacement. And lastly, we have Stefan Boltzmann's law, which is also obtained from Planck's formula. We obtain Stefan Boltzmann law thermodynamically. Using Planck's formula, again, you can obtain Stefan Boltzmann law. Basically, what is Stefan Boltzmann law? It gives us a value of the total energy. And we know that in the radiation curve, the area under the curve gives us the total energy. So in Planck's formula, basically, you have to integrate from 0 to infinity. You have to integrate the expression from 0 to infinity for all values of wavelength. And using this substitution to hc by lambda kt, and following with the other required replacements in this expression of energy, you can see that, and we are changing the limits accordingly. As lambda goes to 0 extends to infinity, and as lambda goes to infinity extends to 0, so the limits of the integration will change. And so we change the variable of the integral from lambda to in terms of x, and this is what we get. Again, all steps are done. Each and every step of integration is also done. So you can just check, and you can find that the value of this integral is pi to the power 4 by 15. So that E equal to 8 pi k to the power 4 t to the power 4 pi to the power 4 by h cube c cube into 15. Everything is a constant. Just you can look at it and say that E equal to some constant into t to the power 4. Right? So it can be shown that for a black body, the emittance or emissive power is CE by 4, so that E equal to 4E by C, and therefore the energy is E equal to sigma T to the power 4, where this is the expression of the constant sigma, which we know as Stefan's constant. This is Stefan Boltzmann's law. Okay, and this last trivia before I end today's class is that experimentally obtained value of Stefan's constant was sigma equal to 5.67 into 10 to the power minus 8 watt per meter square Kelvin to the power 4. Boltzmann constant is known, velocity of light is known. Now the value of Stefan's constant known at that time was this. This is the more refined recent value. At the time of Planck, the value of Stefan's constant was known to be this, and this is experimentally obtained, not mathematically. And using these values in the expression of sigma, it was found that the value of h, Planck's constant, is 6.57 into 10 to the power minus 34 joules second. This is the first calculated value of h. Okay, so of course later on further experiments, more refined and more precise experiments have given us what we now know as the value of Planck's constant. But this was the first method of calculation of h. This was how Planck obtained h, and this is the value of h he used to fit the experimental curves, and you can see how beautifully his mathematical expression fitted the experimental curve. And this is, you can understand the historical importance of this calculation, how it gave the world, or rather the universe, the value of h, the Planck's constant, which is a constant of enormous importance, as you can understand. Okay, so I went a little fast in today's class, but as I told you, everything is there, all the calculations, all the steps are included in the slide. So please go through the slides and do the calculations by yourself to understand whether you have understood everything. Okay.